Organized play. Welcome back to the magic. I am, filling time until I can make sure that the stream is actually working, like I always do for the first 2 minutes of the stream. So, welcome to it. Let's make sure that things are working. Oh, look, I see my own glorious face twice in my computer monitor. What an amazing time to be alive. Hey, everybody. So, welcome to the show. We have several topics to cover today, although it's pretty open-ended. So if you do have questions, please drop them in the chat room. We have time to cover that stuff. We're only going to talk an hour today, like we normally do. But I don't think today's segment is not particularly involved, so we definitely have room to have some back and forth. Even though, I have to point over here, even though, as you can see, I have 5 different things on the list for today's topics. So, let's start right off the top. Today we're going to talk about our session recap, as we always do. So, when we last left our valiant heroes, they had taken a long rest. They had decided to keep the villagers outside of the Dripping Caves complex and kind of forage for them in the woods, take a long rest, level up, and then see what they felt like in the morning. Although the villagers had made it clear, like, we'd like to go home if that's possible. So, after a little bit of discussion about whether they wanted to go in and clean out the final 2 portions of the Dripping Caves, because there's 2 passageways that they have not gone down, which I was okay with them going down. I had not prepared anything interesting to happen to them when they went down that. So I did do a little bit of role playing to kind of nudge them in the direction of how about maybe we do something for the villagers as opposed to going on what's essentially going to be 20 minutes of pretty boring dungeon crawling. Note to self for perhaps next session, it would be nice to spice up the remaining portion of the Dripping Caves so that there could actually be something interesting happening there. Because right now it's boring as paste. They're going to fight the ooze and everyone else is cleared out. So that could definitely use some extra juice. And at the end of the session, I give them enough XP to level up to level 4. So if they're going to goof around with that thing, then I need to put some thought into what could I potentially do here to make this interesting. They seem to think that there's still 2 casks of ale left. They came to town with 6 casks of ale. It's pretty clear that at least 2 of them have been drunk or destroyed. They've recovered 2 of them, and the party is a little befuddled as to, well, what happened to those last 2? Goblins had it overnight, right? Like, but I think they want to, get the job done. Fine. It's just an opportunity for me to develop that portion of the adventure with some stuff that's harder than what's already pre-written, right? It feels like we're leveling really fast. They just leveled up to 3 last session. Then I gave them another 900 XP. They leveled up to 4 when they come into next session. And probably at the end of next session, I'm going to level them up to 5 and, like, call it good. Maybe we'll get 1 more session out of it. But we're definitely, because of the milestone system that's in play in the first chapter, we're power leveling this thing. And I'm kind of a jerk and a little stingy about XP in the first place, but to power level them like through 5 levels in 4 sessions that feels a little gratuitous to me. So that's where that is at. They decided, nope, we're not going to go into the Dripping Caves. Let's take these guys back to the city. They started to head back. I had some ideas, as we talked about on Tuesday, about what was going to happen. And the one thing that I had decided was that the orcs had taken over the city and that they had captured at least Kella Darkhope and potentially Zolkin. but those guys were captured. The orcs were in charge of the village now because they let the orcs go by. So, in prepping for that particular scenario, I was looking for a way to raise the stakes on the situation, and what I decided upon was that the village, that the orcs were not particularly careful or good citizens or anything like that. So they had come in, taken over the place, and now that where they were in a very defensible position, they had sort of like let their hair down and let their celebration get the best of them, and bad things were happening. So as the party started to come out of the woods to the northwest, from the northwest side of town, I was like, you can smell this before you can see it, but it's clear there's a column of smoke coming up from inside the town. And as they got closer and got to the edge of the woods, they could see that it looked basically like the temple of Maliki and Lathander had been set on fire, and there was this huge plume of flame and burning smoke coming up off of that building. I hadn't 100% decided if it was purely malicious and intentional, or if they had decided, or if it was something where somebody started a fire and it kind of got out of control, or they had been scavenging wood off the building and the fire just sort of spread beyond what they wanted to, or maybe they just got, kind of drunk and out of control and accidentally set the fire. Regardless of the intent, I wanted to make sure they knew, like, something bad is happening in town. And they had an inkling that those orcs were going to make a return. I had told them on our private chat group that they needed to bring miniatures, even though I wasn't planning to run a gridded combat every single session. They would need miniatures that night. So they had a suspicion that there was another big fight in store, which, of course, there was. Right, so you have to deliver. So that brought about this weird, players really struggle between doing something heroic and doing something tactically smart, and that's where, as a DM, you kind of just have to hang back and watch them struggle with whatever kind of decision they're trying to make. Sometimes I will let it go on for 15 minutes and then either intervene or clarify things, because I've watched parties sit around and build this elaborate set of circumstances when in fact they're mistaken about a couple fundamental things that they remember from the previous session or whatever. And if it gets too far off of the beaten track of where their leaning tower of assumptions is going to fall over disastrously once they go into the actual adventure, back into the actual scenario, then I will step in and say, you know what, you remember this actually happened this way, and you're not sure if you saw these guys there. And so I will clarify some of the details that often get muddy when you are sitting there, when a party is sitting there trying to make a battle plan and a week has gone by or 2 weeks have gone by or whatever it's been since your last session. So I will let them, I will pay out some rope, as it were, and let them figure out what way they want to handle the situation. And if need be, then I will at some point step in and kind of rein in some of their expectations or clarify some of the assumptions that they've made about what may or may not be happening. In this particular case, they were intent on doing some sort of reconnaissance ahead of time. So that's fine. They didn't have a particularly great plan. So there were sort of two competing plans. One was, if we take a look at the village, I always like to bring these up and then completely forget that I have them up. So we'll probably be looking at the Nightstone map for the rest of the day, but that's fine. So one of their plans, so they're coming from, if you look at the map, they're coming from basically where the N in Nightstone is. There's woods there. I wish we had a little bit bigger kind of general area map, because they're unclear, like where do the woods start and stop and all that kind of garbage, which deservedly so. Like they end up going into the woods and out of the woods. They've ended up going in there a couple times, so it's important for them to know this stuff, but I just have to kind of make it up and give my best guess. So so there were two competing plans. One of the plans was to sneak around the woods to the north and then dive in the river someplace and float downstream and use the river essentially as cover and find a place where they could then sort of land and maybe infiltrate the town, spy, etc. Right? So that was one plan that was proposed, although going in the river means taking off your armor, as far as I'm concerned. You know, the players like to debate over whether you can swim in a chain shirt or not. You know, it's only 30 pounds. I'm like, yeah, it's 30 pounds like hanging off of your arms, like weighing your chest down. You know, it's very difficult to swim with 30 pounds of extra bulk. But especially since most of the party is built on a stealth build and has horrible strength scores. That was one plan that was pitched. The other plan was essentially for the monk who has the best stealth score to kind of furtively scurry across this big plain of open field to the northwest and go over by the drawbridge and get a better look at what's going on. So they debated those two things a little bit. It was kind of a struggle because most of the party was like, this river thing is really complicated and we don't want to have to screw with our armor, and who's going to stay here with the villagers, and are any of these villagers actually capable of doing anything? And I had indicated that Jorgen, who of course is Harshnag, had several levels of exhaustion, but he was willing to kind of defend the people and cooperate in whatever way that he could. And I had him like rip an oak tree out of the ground and snap it over his knee and then kind of shape it into a great club, since he's missing his axe and all of his equipment. So that was fine. They decided, you know what, we're just going to send the monk ahead. The monk was fairly confident, like, don't worry, I got this. And then he proceeded to roll like a 2 or a 3 on his stealth check and did not have this and got spotted by the orcs that were on guard. Because these aren't goblins who are like screwing around and stupid and careless. Yes, there's a certain number of careless orcs, but also I figure the orc boss, he knows that the elves are hot and heavy on his trail. He knows that there's, you know, strange things afoot. He already fought off one occupying force. He already, you know, defeated the Zents in this town. He's expecting company to show up regardless of what happened here and the place getting shelled. So I ruled he's got some guards on alert. He's not just resting on his laurels and camping. So, sure enough, the monk blows his stealth check, and the orcs, you know, sound the alarm, or at least start yelling, and more orcs start showing up on the edge of the wall, looking over the wall and pointing, and, you know, saying something. He can't hear what it is, blah, 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 but he was clearly spotted, so he, like, kind of took off to the northeast and went back into the woods and then circled back. But, you know, he'd given himself away at that point. At which point, after a long amount of discussion, they decided to go the river route. And a big portion of that discussion was spent trying to decide, do we leave the guys in armor back with the villagers and then send our 4 stealthiest guys into the village to scout things out and try and drop the drawbridge and lead the rest of the, you know, the rest of the party could lead the giant and the villagers in as kind of like a surprise move or whatever. That plan lost a lot of appeal when I pointed out that if the stealth force got in any kind of trouble, that it would take a minimum of 10 to 12 rounds for the guys to run full bore across the field and make it to the city. Which, they're 600 feet away or whatever it is, but the reality of them being gnomes and dwarves is they just don't move very fast, and they're not rogues, so it's not like they can take double dash action. So for them to cross that amount of field, like that's how long it's like. As long as the four of you think you can hold off whatever is going on in town for 10 rounds, sure, it's a perfectly good plan. So that crunched that. So they ended up diving into the river, not literally diving. I did some just basically kind of like random dice call judgments of like how difficult, how hard is this for the party. I'm maybe a little too brutal with my dice methodology in that I tend to roll a 6-sider, and if it's a 1 to 3, something bad happens for the party, and if it's a 4 to 6, something the situation benefits the party, which kind of rigs the odds a little bit, maybe too much in favor of bad things happening. I might consider going 1 to 2 and then 3 to 6, but that's an easy way for me to do that. Yeah, they do need mounts. You are correct. Their mounts got eaten by the goblins. They had mules. There's no horses anywhere in sight. And curiously, there's no horses in the village. I guess the only people who had horses were the Zentarim who managed to show up. So at any rate, the river was shallow enough, 6 to 8 feet, that they could stow their armor in a backpack and then kind of like not really bob along, but kind of. It certainly wasn't wading. It was like you dive down, and the current lets you drift a little bit with the current, and then you come up for air, and then you dive down, and you come up for a little bit. The monk character is a shadow monk, and so he burned a key point to cast Pass Without Trace, and that spell is ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. Like plus 10 to your stealth checks is brutal. So that enabled them to get by. The orcs don't have any bonus to their perception checks, so as long as nobody heinously botched it and the orcs didn't get an insanely great roll, everything was fine. So they actually managed to kind of come around the right-hand side of the eastern side of the river. They went down that fork, and then they went in between the keep and the main part of town, and they pulled up. I'm not sure that taking 10 is something that you can do anymore in 5th edition. I will say, as a side note, there's essentially no swimming rules, as far as I can tell. We looked in the player's handbook, and they were painfully shy of information about swimming. Maybe it's in the DMG or something, but I feel like I was like, make an athletics check. Okay. I mean, it doesn't say anything like what the consequences are for failure. I think somewhere in there's something about how long you can hold your breath, but it was really, they were not at a big penalty for not being good swimmers, which was surprising to me. But I didn't want to make a big deal out of their plan. Like, I knew the meat of the evening was, like, getting them into town. And so I didn't want to punish them for coming up with a plan and then having to make a really, like, huge string of tough rolls in order to implement that plan. Because it was essentially the best plan available to them. So they made 4 or 5 stealth checks and aced them largely with flying colors. I got a couple new dice at Gen Con, and one of them, I swear to God, does not roll above a 9. I think it may be the only thing that saved their lives this week in the session, because it was gross. It was gross how many 3s and 6s and 8s and 9s that it that kicked in over the course of last night's session. So they came around. I explained to them. I gave them a couple options, and they didn't seem to they weren't real keen. At the point on the map where the wooden bridge goes across, I explained to them there's pilings that go into the water, so if you wanted to sneak underneath those pilings and then just kind of hang on to them like halfway on shore or halfway in the water or whatever and put your armor on, you could do that and then kind of hike around the edge. But they were like, no, let's go to where the fallen tower is, where the breach in the wall is, and we'll go put our armor on there. Which, of course, is like the obvious place for anyone to go entering into town, and which, of course, is the reason I set up an ambush there. So they pulled on to land and started putting their armor on, and I said, make a perception check, and they quickly spotted a couple of goblins. So I'm going to pull you guys over to the delicious orc battle map that I made, which looks like... Oh, that's the one. Is that the one that I moved? Oh, I just didn't turn it on. Here we go. Looks like this. Is there a better place to put that? Nah, it's fine. You don't need to look at my dumb face. So, they're on the edge of this stockade wall, and they see up by the windmill, they see a couple of goblins with bows kind of going, straight into, going up onto that hill and sort of taking up a position, but not really looking down that way, but they see them taking up a position next to the windmill. And I explained, this is a hill, it goes up, 20 or 30 feet, and they're hanging out. They're just kind of hanging up there. It looks like they're not really like scouting or watching. They're not on watch. It's more of a situation where they were sent up there to take up a position or whatever. Because I wanted to give these guys at least some sort of opportunity to figure out, oh, maybe bad things are happening here. It didn't particularly work, but that's fine. So I'm going to drop my face back on top of everything that's going on here. Oh, look, I covered up half the map, everybody. It's me. It's a little picture-in-picture. So at any rate, so they saw a couple of these goblins, and they're like, oh, well, we should sneak in there and gank those guys before they can raise the alarm. I'm like, okay, that's a long way. Let me just pull my dumb face out of here again. That's a long way, realistically speaking. It's not a super long way, but in terms of as fast as a party can move, to get up there and kill two goblins without them doing anything is going to be a tricky move. I'd like to see what's really happening there. So they decided, okay, we're going to put our armor on before we go and do that. So that's fine. Then they decided, then I had to make another perception check, and I told them that an orc crossed along the road from one side to the other, essentially on a little bit of a patrol type of situation, right? And they were like, oh, wait a minute, now there's an orc and two goblins. Like, now this is getting more complicated. Okay, true, that's the idea. It didn't really dissuade them from basically trying to... They waited for the orc to pass by again. They jumped out, tried to gank the orc, and botched the attack roll. So at that point, the alarm starts going off, and not only do two goblins... let me move this, scroll the map a little bit. Not only did two goblins pop out from behind the windmill here and take shots with their short bows, but two more goblins pop out. So there's four goblins up on the hill, which is exactly like what was set up. So basically, the backstory here is I decided that Boss Hark took his remaining forces, connected up with the orcs in the village, and cut them a deal, right? So, the goblins are on patrol along with the orcs. Let's make this a little juicy. And there's another orc on the other side who's also on patrol. So there's 2 orcs. There's 4 goblins. They come charging through the gap. They try to take care of the goblins. They are not very successful. The party's very strung out. And basically we begin this long rolling combat that lasted the rest of the evening. So as they began fighting, waves of orcs came out from the village along this road here and began engaging them. And I think we've looked at this enough. And for anyone who has looked at the stats for orcs, as a bonus action, they can move towards a hostile creature that they can see. So they can essentially like double move for free, which is a brutal. So I had a wave of the goblins. They mopped up the first 2 orcs fairly quickly. The goblins retreated inside the windmill. The Dragonborn sorcerer, who is the latest addition to the party, decided, hey, because the goblins had retreated to the windmill and then kind of locked the door, but they had kicked out some boards so that they could use them as arrow slits. So they were doing this thing where they pop out, they'd shoot a couple arrows at the guys, and then they'd pop back to the side and have total cover where nobody could hit them with anything, right? So that's fine. Then they... the Dragonborn sorcerer has firebolt, and he's like, is there any way that I can shoot a firebolt into the windmill? What's this windmill made out of? It's made out of wood. Can I shoot a firebolt into the windmill and catch it on fire? All right, that's a really cool idea. So I want to reward that idea. He rolls like a 19. He's just shy of a crit, and I'm like, that's good enough. That's really cool. What do they do in a windmill? They grind wheat. What happens when you grind wheat? You get a lot of fine particulate dust in the air. What happens when you touch a flame to fine particulate dust? Long story short, he blew the roof clean off the windmill and sends it sailing into the air. He did a bunch of damage to the goblins, did not kill them, but he did do a bunch of damage to them, and that was pretty brutal. So that was a really cool moment. The top blows off. The goblins are like, what's happening? They start shooting arrows. But of course, also at this point, waves of orcs are coming in. They start fighting this weird kind of like running battle. I sent 2 wargs and another orc after them. I sent 6 orcs in the front. Guys were going down. People were popping them back up. The bard, for some reason, decided to take the front rank like in the 2nd round or 3rd round of combat. And it was, I mean, he got 2-shotted, like 2 orcs don't necessarily hit often, but when they hit hard. And he took like 13 and 17 points of, 17 isn't possible. He took 13 points of damage and like 12 points of damage and was like out instantly, like down, started making death saves for like the next 3 or 4 rounds. That was brutal. The Dwarven fighter rogue ended up drinking his potion of heroism. They're casting Bless. The Dwarven ranger is doing this thing. He took the Colossus Slayer feat, so anytime something doesn't have full hit points, he gets an extra D8, and then on top of it, he casts Hunter's Mark, so he's rolling that around. So he's doing, with his crossbow, he's doing a D10 plus a D8 plus a D6 if he can get his Hunter's Mark on that guy. So he's pumping out like massive amounts of damage, but he's also missing left and right. But it's funny because he would like move 10 feet, take a shot, and then move 15 feet away from wherever the bad guys were. He was fighting like the most cowardly combat you could imagine. And the rest of the table is like, dude, you've got hit points. Like, you need to get up here to like start tanking for us because the bard keeps popping up and popping down. Like, the cleric, thank God they got a life cleric with them because they would have never survived. And so I sent the first wave of orcs after them. They kind of handled them and felt like, oh, we might have this combat in hand. Like, this was looking dicey, but I feel like we've got this, guys. And then I sent the second wave of orcs after them, and like you could just see the players' faces drop. Like, oh no, we are in over our heads. That first wave sort of moved closer, and then I had everybody make a perception check at the top of the next round, and they could hear the noise of someone beating on the gate with a giant oak tree. So they knew that Jorgen was on his way, but Jorgen's got to make his way in. He's got to beat down the drawbridge. It's not easy for him to do because he's making all of his checks at disadvantage. So that it turned into a super dicey combat. I did not send everybody that I anticipated sending after them. I didn't send Boss Hark after them. I will say, I assumed that all of the orcs had a long rest. If the party got a long rest, all the orcs did. So I thought about sending the orc leader in with his full 93 hit points. Instead, I sent the shaman in, and I've just sort of ruled that she took over the Eye of Grumpsh, took over the leadership role. Apparently, the leader must have gotten either there was a coup or he got killed in the assault or whatever it was. Fine. I didn't feel like sending him in. She was a big enough threat. She started using spiritual weapon, and that was interesting. So they definitely, there was a lot of very dicey moments, and it took a good 2.5, 3 hours for this whole thing to play out. So that was all we were going to get accomplished that night. So they pushed their way into the city. They fought off essentially 3 waves of orcs. Things were looking bad, but the bard at a clutch moment cast. I think it was Dissonant Whispers. I think he cast Dissonant Whispers on the Eye of Grumpsh, and she failed and had to run away for a full round. And at that point, Jorgen comes walking in and sees her and begins thrashing her with his great club. So it was a nice moment for him to come in and make a showing. And one of the players got me a nice Fire Giant mini that he pulled out of a Storm King's Thunder box. So I used him for Jorgen. I was going to just use a Reaper, but that was pretty cool. So I got to, whenever you get to put that mini on the battle mat, it's see, I don't know if it's going to focus or not, but what if I do this? What if I do this? Doesn't matter. The point being, it looks cool. So I got to drop him on the battle mat and have him thrash the Eye of Grumpsh a little bit, but they also contributed to, I believe, the Dwarven Rangers, or the Dwarven Fighter Rogue finally put the killing shot on the Eye of Grumpsh and ended the combat, and everybody felt great. So it was it was exactly what I wanted to do. It was a set-piece combat. It was long, it was involved, it was tense, it was gritty. There was a lot of, there was a lot of death saving throws made that night. The cleric was burned clean out of spells. The bard, I think the sorcerer also, everybody was wrung out to the max. It was a great fight. It was a perfect thing to have happen at that level. Last session I felt was challenging, but had kind of a slow boil aspect to it, and I never really felt like the party was truly threatened by what was going on. And this session accomplished that. It definitely made them feel their own mortality and feel that they had earned what was their victory. Let's put it that way. Kid Carly asks, when you have a lot of creatures, how do you manage their rolls and hit points? So the good news is that I only had 6 to 9 combatants, NPC combatants, on the board at any one time. And those become easy to manage because I just divvy them up according to who they're attacking. So it's like, you got 2 people attacking you, you got 1 guy attacking you, you got 2 people attacking you, you're in the back, you're safe, there's 2 guys on you, and then I'm going to roll 1 to 3, 4 to 6, one of you is getting attacked 1 extra time. And then I'll just roll those attacks out in the open. They know what the bonus is, they know what the damage is, blah, blah, blah. boom, boom, boom. With nine monsters on the board, like, because you're targeting the NPCs, it doesn't get super boring. Whereas if I was going to do 9 attacks against one NPC, I don't know, that might get a little tedious. I'm gonna open my curtain here for a minute so that the sun shines upon me in direct glory. It's not better. It's not better, you guys. I'm gonna close them completely so that it is better. This is my struggle every day, not to get cooked like a turkey on Thanksgiving. How's that look? Better? Almost. I'm a professional Twitch caster. All right, so that's our recap. That's what happened. It was pretty cool. I was very happy with how the session worked out. I got to use the battle map that I made. I did end up hooking up my expandable, my fold-out flip mat. I just like directly kind of plopped that on top of the existing gaming paper mat that I made, and that worked out fairly well. Like, I didn't have to draw the whole city, but I had this like set piece that they kind of came in on, and then I expanded the village of Nightstone as they got deeper into it, and that worked really well. I was really happy with that whole setup. All right, our next topic, mini DM screen. So for those of you who follow me at Dungeon Bastard on Twitter, you maybe caught the fact that yesterday, just in time for my game, I got a mini version of the World's Greatest Screen from Hammerdog Games. So if you're not familiar with the World's Greatest Screen, actually I should have gotten that one out first, but it is this mini version is essentially an 8-pocket vinyl. Let's start over here. 8-pocket vinyl foldable DM screen. Okay, so it doesn't look particularly cool from this side. I have not tricked it out yet, but on the inside, these vinyl pockets, you can put. Am I giving anything away? No, I'm not. You can put whatever you like inside these DM screens. So you can make whatever kind of inserts you like. I went on the DM David blog, and I've got the conditions listed here. I've got typical difficulty classes and movement types, and I've got the character XP advancement information over here as well, right? And then in the middle, what I decided to do was print off some stat blocks that I was going to use last night. So I had the stat block for Jorgen. I had the stat block for the Goblin Boss, which it turns out I did not use. But now I'll be able to, so I don't know a good way to demonstrate this. I'll be able to go in. It's a little bit tricky. I don't know if I'm showing this properly. So I can go in, take out Jorgen's stats if I so choose, and I can put in something else. So it's 100% customizable. If you were going to go off and play something else, you know, you wanted to take this to a convention and you're going to run a Fate game, and you know, you wanted the ladder on there, or you were going to run whatever, you want to put notes, you can put an index card in there, you can put sticky notes on top of it. I've had other versions of this. They have a full size, they have a 4-panel portrait version, and they have a 3-panel landscape version, which I also like. I've actually basically kind of worn out the landscape version, but if this is a nice landscape DM screen. So far, I'm pretty happy with it. Really, my only complaints are it's a little tricky to get, you know, to get your fingers into those vinyl pockets and to get the stuff out. I think there's got to be a better way for me to move those things in and out. And then it doesn't quite fold up in a manner that makes sense. This is a very long way, 3x3. And then if you fold it like that, it tends to form kind of a V, as opposed to, I like my DM screen to form more of a U kind of shape. I'm really fussy about my DM stuff. But I am going to, I've got some Jeff Easley art, kind of like trading card type of stuff that I'm going to put in here. I've also considered putting in, so if you use the NPC face cards from Pathfinder, like I love those things in terms of, hey, you've met this guy Morak de Urgray. I pull out a face card. He looks like this. You know, I wish that Wizards would take a lesson from the premium accessories that Pathfinder does when they produce their their premium adventures. So if I buy into the adventure path for Shattered Star or whatever is going on, I can get a deck of treasure cards specific for that adventure. I can get a deck of NPC cards specific to that adventure. Like, that crap is cheap to produce and brilliant. You know, you're probably putting those art assets together anyhow. All you have to do is print them on, cards, and boom, you got a deck that's $10 or whatever that costs you, I'm sure, literally pennies to produce. Now, it's not that cheap. But the point being, like, those are great assets for the DM to have. And I wish that I had something like that I could put in here, like, this is Jorgen, you've met him, I put Jorgen's name. I think what I'm going to end up doing is falling back on my old trick of tracing somebody's face off of the art inside the book, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe giving it a little bit of a treatment or something like that, and then writing Jorgen over there. So that's I wish I had a little more options for things specific to this campaign that I could put in here. I think the front two panels could very easily be a mini map, or maybe even the front 4 panels could be a mini map of the Forgotten Realms of the Sword Coast. That could be an ideal thing to slot in these pockets, because I think we're going to refer to it a lot. On the other hand, I'm thinking about just getting one printed at like 20 by 30 and having it laminated and bringing it for Adventures League on a regular basis. But that's a big map to tote around on a regular basis. I don't like, it doesn't roll up very well. If I could get it printed on like canvas or something like that, that would be perfect. I want an unmounted canvas, perfect. I might send the JPEG file, because I bought the map from Mike Schle's website. I might send that to some sort of photo printing place and say, print this on unstretched canvas. It's not a bad idea. And then you can just roll it up, and it also looks cool. All right. So the other thing that I did like this. I talked a lot about how I did not want to use up a lot of room at the table, and I wanted to keep my DM footprint very small. I talked about that in some of the earlier episodes. That's still my goal, but the advantage to having this is I can define, this is my chunk of the table, because we have 6 guys sitting around one of those standard 3x6 or whatever it is, folding tables, and they take up all the space. Like, if I don't claim part of the territory, then, they just sort of expand to fit the space as needed, and I need some of that space, you guys. That's just the facts of the way that it is. So that's the other advantage of this thing, is I can stake out my portion of the table, but it's very unobtrusive. I don't have to hide my die rolls, but I can. It definitely hides enough of my notes for what I'm comfortable with. It was $20 plus $5 for shipping, so it's $25. They have Gale Force 9 has one for Storm King's Thunder. The nice thing about that is it does have the map in it, and I think that's more useful. Like, you'll see a bunch of complaints on Amazon, like, this thing is garbage. I wouldn't pay $18 for something where half the thing is just a map. It's like, have you read the adventure? Because most of the adventure is you running around on a map. So, overall, I'm impressed with the quality. I'm happy with it. I think it will see a lot more use. Do I need 2 of them? I'm not sure, but I think this is going to serve me well for now. Yeah, I'm very happy with this. So you can go to hammerdog.com, hammerdog.com, and pick up your own if you so choose. I know D20 Monkey Brian Patterson has some inserts for them. You can customize it yourself. You can find some resources online to help you customize it. I'm very happy with it. It's not an intensive craft project to put stuff in here, right? I think really the key is to have stiff paper that's gonna like slide when you put a little leverage on it. All right, so look ahead. We got 15 minutes left. I don't think we have a ton of questions, so if you guys start thinking if you have things that you want to address, let me know. But we have some time to cover a few of these topics. A look ahead. So whenever that comes up, there's always invariably something that I forget. But mostly what this is talking about is 2 things. So what are we looking at the rest of this chapter? Honestly, I'm not sure. So we have Morak giving out the quest in some way, shape, or form. I don't know that I may even do that. I may have him reveal himself as kind of also a Zent agent. That would really tie in to Kella visiting his establishment and add another layer of nefarious intrigue as to what's going on. But then I believe I talked about this last session, like he knocks open one of these things of ale and gets out all of these contraband goods and says, I need you to take this to Bryn Shander and deliver it to so-and-so or whatever, and here's 200 golds or whatever it takes. So that's pretty cool. So they have to get motivated on doing one of these quests. They might go to the Dripping Caves. Is something that I'll talk about more on Tuesday. I do need to have a scene where they find Kella and or Zolkin tied up, held hostage, imprisoned, beat up, whatever happened with them with the orcs. I thought about maybe doing something cheesy where the chief of the orcs had decided to like capture Kella as his war bride, but that just feels a little skeezy. So I don't think that's going to end up happening. I think they're just both going to be, mistreated and scuffed up and held for ransom. Maybe like tied up in the barn or something like that. But the next portion of the final part of the adventure or of this chapter is the party traveling in the Cloud Castle. And it really strains credulity. I looked to see if Zephyros, the guy who shows up, actually reappears, and I can't find any mentions of him further on in the adventure. So really, that's like twice in the adventure where we have this out-of-nowhere magical taxi driver show up and offer to give them a sky ride conveniently to wherever they happen to be going. I don't like that. I think it might be better if Jorgen takes in what happened here in Nightstone and then said, we need to track these guys down. At which point the party says they took off in a cloud castle. How do you track a cloud castle? And Jorgen is like, well, I guess you're not very good trackers now, are you? So, and then he actually goes and like tracks down the cloud castle. But I think we may find the cloud castle burned, abandoned, the cloud giants dead, murdered by, I don't know, maybe the cult of the dragon. That would be cool. This stuff stolen, etc. Could be murdered by a rival set of hill giants or any kind of giants. It could be stone or what have you. It could be also frost giants. Who knows who's behind it? The important thing is they catch up to the cloud castle, and then Jorgen has the opportunity to somehow commandeer it and command it. Maybe it can only be commanded by giants, which is why it's drifting. So I like that angle far better than Zephyros, the friendly dude, shows up and just Deus Giant Ex Machina gives them a ride across country to their next destination. The other thing that I will point out about the Cloud Castle encounters is there's that Orb Strike encounter, and they don't ever give an armor class or hit points as far as I can tell for the navigation orb. So you're just going to have to figure out what the deal is, like how that's gonna work. I'm not particularly. You're gonna have to wing that one, and I feel like that's something that deserves an errata. Like how? Okay, so how do we know if the strike force that shows up to attack these guys is actually successful? Well, better figure it out. So that's something that we need to consider. All right, another look ahead. I brought this up last time. I'm going to trumpet the idea of backing our Patreon at the $5 and higher level, because these are the upcoming quest lines for the next chapter. If we look further ahead into Chapter 3, you have to decide before Chapter 3 starts where you want to send them. And if you look at the quest lines that are coming out of here, some of them have better rewards than other ones, right? You can argue that maybe some of them are better battle scenes than other ones, but for me, I'm making my decision based on the outcome and not based on which particular battle scenario I like better. I haven't decided whether I'm going to fudge like Bryn Shander into attach the Triboar quest line to Bryn Shander or not, or flip it around. I don't know. The only reason I even consider that is because they've already done one battle where it's defend this sad village from an occupying force, and if I send them to Triboar, it's defend the village from an invading force, and it feels very open field contest, lack of choke points, kind of just not as tactical. I'm more inclined to perhaps make the geography of Triboar more interesting than it currently is, in terms of give it some elevation and give it some natural approaches and things like that. Give it a little more tactical feel than it currently has. Because right now it's just basically like a bunch of buildings around the intersection of a couple major roads, and it feels a little dry, but I have to read it more detail. The other thing the reason that I would suggest that you back our Patreon is I have come up with, so when I was looking at this material, I decided, well, there's all these quest lines that come out of that big assault in Chapter 2 or Chapter 3 or whatever it is. How much wandering around the Sword Coast are we talking about? Well, as it so happens, I took my fancy tracing paper and I did short, concise maps of all of the towns that are potentially involved in the 6 different quest lines that are coming out of each one of those locations. So if you send them to Golden Fields, these are the cities that are involved in the various quests coming out of Golden Fields. If you send them to Triboar, these are the cities, because I looked at the overall map of the Forgotten Realms and it drove me nuts to figure out, okay, well, wait, how far are they going? How much wandering around? Is there a way to do? And the players are going to ask these questions anyhow, right? They're going to ask like, oh, okay, is there a shortest possible distance between all of these things for us to complete this? Can we make like a quick circuit and take care of them in order, or should we just do them at random? And of course, you're going to have to answer that question, and you can either spend 10 minutes poring over your notes, or you can back the Patreon at $5 and get access to this map. I will say, I'm probably going to drop these maps later into the free folder that everybody gets. But if you back our Patreon, they're in the special Patreon backers file folder. They're there right now. And Dom sent out an email link to that at the top of the show. So check your email if you're currently pledged in, and you will get access to those things right now, which may help you get an idea of like, okay, where am I going? What sections of Chapter 3 do I have to read? How much overland travel are we talking? Is there a novel way for me to tie these things together? Where might they stop along the way, etc.? So I think those things will really um, I think those things will really help everyone out in terms of getting some organizational insight into what's happening. So, a reason to back the Patreon, like I said, I will probably make them free in the next couple of weeks. But right now, I wanted to give our backers a little bit of extra juice. You not only get that, but the other thing that's in there. Oh, there's another map that's in there. Oh, the quest line thing is in there as well, right? So the complete chart, not the truncated version that I've shown on the screen here, but the complete chart of the quest lines is also in there. All of this stuff is stuff that you could make if you spent an hour with the book and decided to put the stuff together. I've done it for you. Hopefully it's worth that, along with everything else we do on Saving Throw, is worth an extra $5 to you. So that's the deal. If we have any questions, please. I guess I always do say Patreon wrong, don't I? Patreon, Patreon. Whatever the right way is to say it, I am adamantly against that. So if you have any questions in the Q&A, we just have a few minutes here to wrap up. I will be back on Tuesday to do the prep shows, but generally I have several things to mull through and talk with you about. So I like to do Q&A on days like today where we spend half an hour on the wrap up, and then we can tackle some open-ended topics if we need to. So if you have something that you want to chat about, I'm happy to take a quick question or two. I didn't really see anything on any of our YouTube videos. There was something else that I was thinking about. So I will say Monday Night Dungeon Fight starts on Monday. I am currently brushing up the rules for Season 3 to make them even more modular and balanced and add a few tweaks in there. So I suggest, if you're interested in making a character, that will probably go up in the next week or two. I'd love to get instructions to our Patreon backers out before the end of the weekend, but I don't know whether that's feasible or not. But that's the next project that I'm tackling. Is Season 3 of Monday Night Dungeon Fight is coming up, and Monday night is going to feature Amy Vorpal. Talene is playing, David Crennan is playing, and Eric Reichert is playing. So that's the that's the plan there. Yes, and in a month, I am doing Gamehole Con, so you'll be able to meet with me and my full guys as Bill Cavalier at Gamehole Con, and I will actually be running a tournament version of Monday Night Dungeon Fight at Gamehole Con, and I got to try and wrangle some prizes to get people some nice gifts for that. I don't think that'll be a huge issue, but that's the thing. Have I given a thought to Nightstone's actual Nightstone's whereabouts? As far as I can tell, SKT completely ditches it. I have to agree with you that it's weird that this is the inciting incident, and then it's never brought up again, because I read ahead to the Cloud Giant section in SKT, and I was kind of disappointed that they're like, oh, well, they're looking for this hidden treasure trove, and it never comes back to like what Nightstone was, what it was for, what was important about it, like none of that stuff. And I think there's an opportunity there for players to get some sort of reward for figuring out the mystery of what happened to it, where did it go, and why did they want it. Oh yeah, oh, that's what happened to that. Like we need to have that payoff, or certainly we don't need to have it, but it would be a great payoff if 5 chapters from now they stumble upon a lair of Cult of the Dragon, cultists, and they had this thing or whatever, or they had sold it, or they heard news about it, or like I'm 100% on board with the idea that like it just goes away, and The Grognard says that it shows up in Cloud Giant's bargain. I'm hoping to get a copy of that soon. I was not able to secure that. And that is something like, I want to be clear that I'm not necessarily poo-pooing some of these things as like this is a gaping hole or flaw in the adventure in terms of this doesn't make sense and why is it like this, because those sorts of open-ended things are very deliberately left as hooks into Adventurers League content that will then spin out in different expeditions for this current season of Adventurers League. And also it gives room for the DM to improvise, to hook things into their own particular campaign. And it also alleviates some of the, well, that was very tidy kind of small box type of design that you may see in other adventures. So it's not necessarily a flaw. It's just for what I'm running, I like to kind of like throw darts at things and pinpoint moments. And, you know, the danger is sometimes you wait too long and the players will forget about it. When it comes back, they're like, well, what's this? What's this big black monolith thing again? Why do we care about? And you're like, oh, remember like 4 months ago when you found like there's that hole in the ground? Oh, yeah. All right, so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is my hour. If you have other questions or whatever, please hit me up on Twitter at Dungeon Bastard. I'm more than happy to address those things there, or to you can drop obviously comments on our YouTube archive, etc. That's it for me. Let's take a look at the calendar. So later tonight, we have nothing because. Why would you compete with the 900-pound gorilla, which is Critical Role? So go and do what you want to do and enjoy your night tonight. Friday, we have Call of Cthulhu. It's a new season of Black Bag coming back. They'll be doing some time traveling. That'll be exciting. Saturday, of course, we have Dungeon World Dark Sun and Phoenix Dawn Command. Sunday, I believe we are taking a break, as we usually do. I want to thank everybody who came and watched the new episode of The Last Brigade last night. We had a terrific turnout for that and a lot of new faces. I really appreciate you guys showing them a good time. Hopefully they'll be back. So until next time, I'm Tom Lommel. This has been Disorganized Play. Have a great weekend and let's dungeon!